So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this new interview dedicated to migration. Today with us, we have Laurence Hart, the Director of IOM Coordination Office for the Mediterranean, and also the Chief of Mission for Italy and Malta. Mr. Hart, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good day, good afternoon, good morning to everyone listening to this interview.
So, Mr. Hart, we are very focused on what is happening on our eastern borders, and we are almost forgetting about the Mediterranean region. So how is the situation at the moment? Are numbers decreasing, or media are just not talking about them? And what are the effects of the war in Ukraine?
It's a very complex question. I will try to be as succinct as possible, but eloquent at the same time. Well, let me give you some numbers. This year, just over 33,000 migrants have arrived on European shores, of which approximately 14,760 as of 16th of May. Now, that 33,000 compared to last year is more or less the same. We're talking about 26,200 in the same period last year. 561 people died in the Med, recorded this year, and still one of the most dangerous routes, for which IOM continues to call for proactive state-led search and rescue and clear and safe disembarkation mechanisms. Now, two important trends include an increase of landings in the region of Calabria, mainly from Turkey. The nationalities of these arrivals are mainly Afghans, Syrians, and Iranians, so coming from the east, from the eastern part of the world. And there's also an increase of arrivals of Egyptians to Italy from Libya. And the main nationalities of arrivals to Italy by sea, as of today, are Egypt with approximately 2,800 people, Bangladesh with 2,300, and Tunisia with 1,800 approximately from the central Mediterranean route. When we talk about arrivals from Turkey, then to put into context, Afghans attest themselves at 1,542 arrivals, while from Syria, just over 1,000. So situation, obviously, in a nutshell, remains more or less the same compared to last year. Probably a couple of thousand, few thousand less, a few thousand more, but not a dramatic increase compared to last year. So the attention needs still to be remain on that route, because it hasn't finished. Although, as you rightly said, the Ukrainian conflict has brought about new issues, new problems, new challenges, I would say. Now, it is difficult to see the full cross-regional impacts of the war, but there is concern about its impacts on sectors such as energy and food security, for example. The UN Secretary General was mentioning this a few days ago. And also the trickle down of instability on potential mobility, including through the central Mediterranean. So we are like in an earthquake. The earth is still shaking. The tectonic plates need to find a new position, which will cause a number of changes. Maybe some of them will be positive, but what we see obviously is the potential risks that we're facing in the coming days. In the coming months or in the coming years. So the tectonic plates have to stop to see, the earthquake has to stop before we actually see a new order or a new patterns, new frameworks. As I mentioned, the disruption of agricultural markets already affected by the pandemic, including for wheat, corn, sunflower oil, for example, has significant impacts on rising food prices. FAO estimates a rise between 8 and 20% in prices, especially in North African countries, and above all Egypt, but also Morocco, Libya, and Tunisia, which depend heavily on food imports. So the situation, together with climate change, pre-existing conflict and instability, the socioeconomic effects of COVID-19 pandemic globally, as well as in countries of origin or in transit, and rising fuel prices add to the complexity of the situation and displacement, maybe among the potential consequences. Some initiatives are seeing the day to respond to potential shocks. For example, European Commission is putting forward a 222 million euro package to support the MENA region, but effects are always highly contextual and depend on the interlinkages between political, social, economic, and resilience conditions.
Indeed, so the management of migration is still a challenge, and the war in Ukraine has an impact on it. As you highlighted very well, it adds complexity. You briefly mentioned the role of the European Union. The European Commission, we know, proposed a new EU Pact on Migration and Asylum at the end of 2020. So much has happened in the meantime, from the Afghan crisis to the Belarus instrumentalizing migrants and refugees at the borders, to the most recent conflict, of course, in Ukraine. So do you think that this pact will make the EU better prepared for future migration crises? And is still, do you consider it as a crucial step towards a truly common migration and asylum policy? I mean, what are, in your view, the opportunities, but also the challenges? And do you think that these will really be helpful for countries such as Italy, which are frontline member states addressing migratory flows from the Mediterranean routes?
Right, I'll give you a very short answer and a longer answer. The short answer is the pact is a very comprehensive document. And that is the right approach when we're talking about a phenomenon which is multifaceted and needs really to be hashed out in its dimension, being the developmental one, being the security aspect, the academic one, and so I think in that respect, it is one of those documents which contains all the you can see migration from different prisms, and that is a great value. The risk is that there is a pick and choose or cherry picking by certain member states on what the priorities can be. Now, it's normal to do some cherry picking and take the low-hanging fruit out of a document, but at the same time, you cannot neglect. You have to be balanced in a way in order to have a meaningful impact on governing a phenomenon. It's a phenomenon. Migration is a phenomenon. It's not a problem nor an opportunity. It's a phenomenon. If it's well governed, then it becomes an opportunity. So that's the short answer. The long answer is that we, of course, IOM welcomed the arrival of this pact and the acknowledgement that migration and mobility can be managed under a comprehensive, rights-based, whole-of-route approach. It recognizes that no country can manage migration in isolation, and the complexity of the proposed framework reflects the nature of migration governance. Now, one of the major challenges for the management of future crises, not only migratory, is to ensure policy consistency and coherence among the stakeholders concerned. Opportunities and challenges lie also on the balance between crisis management and longer-term policy that brings coherence between the internal and external dimensions, including balance between return and readmission and legal migration avenues and pathways for international protection. All this is grounded in genuine partnership, in human rights-based and aligned with relevant international frameworks and agreements. The vision and some innovations introduced in the pact are still in the very early stages of implementation, such as the talent package, for example. There are also critical aspects in the pact, such as search and rescue and saving lives, which are not only helpful, but first and foremost, a moral duty and an international obligation. IOM will continue to support the EU and the member states to drawing on its long-standing and global expertise on the different areas proposed.
Thank you. And then maybe looking at the international level. So we know that in 2018, a global compact for migration was adopted by the majority of UN member states, and then it was endorsed by the United Nations General Assembly. So in that case, what is the role this global compact on migration can play, according to you? And I mean, what opportunities does it bring, or what potentialities do you think we should further explore?
Thank you. I think again, I'll give you a very short answer. I think it brings about that this phenomenon cannot be governed in isolation. Being transnational, mainly transnational in nature, the collaboration, the cooperation, the approach needs to be balanced, and it needs to be agreed upon. So that aspect is of key importance. Some states did not join the Global Compact on Migration under the impression that this would limit the sovereignty of states. Actually, it's quite the contrary, is the way of how to find better solution that cannot be found only at national level. And by the way, it's not a binding document, it's a voluntary document. So there is no fines, there is no sanctions if you do not comply. It's a mechanism to facilitate dialogue. How can we harness the potential of migration? How can we limit the constraints that migration in some cases also presents us? Now, this was adopted, this document, as you rightly pointed out, in December 2018. It's a very crucial moment, just after a big migration movement and crisis across the world. It is the first intergovernmentally negotiated UN agreement on a common approach to managing international migration. And it is based on a collective realization that no country can effectively govern migration alone. It is a cooperative framework on international migration, where states have developed a common terminology on key migration issues, as well as a blueprint for comprehensive rights-based migration policy. It outlines 23 objectives concerning all aspects of migration, the so-called 360-degree approach, and several actions that states may choose to implement. It is not legally binding, as mentioned. However, the GCM, the Global Compact for Migration, guiding principle, objectives, and actions are grounded in existing international frameworks. For example, on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and also international law. IOM has offered technical and policy support to more than 100 governments to sustain them in their efforts to implement the GCM. There are more than 50 country and regional networks supporting these efforts, and 27 champion countries pioneering implementation, as well as 9 programs funded through the dedicated Startup Fund for Safely, Orderly, and Regular Migration. The International Migration Review Forum, or IMRF, is the primary intergovernmental global platform to discuss and share progress on the implementation of the GCM globally, with the first forum taking place as we speak in New York. Today is actually the last day of the week of the first IMRF, and there's a lot of attention to it. Each review forum will result in an intergovernmentally agreed progress declaration, where states can reaffirm their commitments to implement the compact. The forum will provide insights into the opportunities that the GCM has brought, as well as the potentialities to further explore, not least in response to the pandemic, as well as recent crises such as Afghanistan and Ukraine. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed how essential migrants are to societies, leading many states to review policies or practice to enhance safe migration, facilitate access to services, and fight discrimination, but also how migrants remain disproportionately affected by shocks, and how pre-existing vulnerabilities were significantly reinforced. It has also reshaped international migration, including through evolving restrictions and requirements for entry, as well as the dynamics of admission, stay, work, and return. Finally, the guiding principles, objectives, and actions proposed in the GCM provides insights to guide states in addressing these challenges and facilitate safe, orderly, and regular migration, leaving no one behind. And we look forward really to hearing from the discussion in New York.
Thank you very much. So we definitely have different tools that we could further explore. And there is this increasing understanding that migration is a phenomenon that needs to be addressed collectively. And this somehow brings me to the external migration policy and the cooperation also with countries of origins and transit, which remains an important pillar of an efficient migration management. However, it's also a complex dimension because it calls, for instance, for a more efficient coordination among all the actors involved. It calls for a multidimensional approach, also specific competencies and tools. Do you think that we are all well equipped to this aim? What would you recommend maybe to strengthen our external dimension migration and how to make it more efficient?
That's a very complex question to which I will try to give a comprehensive answer, although short. Obviously, yes, we are equipped. The question is that the temptation in these complex phenomena is to take shortcuts. And when we embark in shortcuts, these are short-lived, basically. You can have a few gains in the short run, but in the longer term, it doesn't always work. Actually, it rarely works in the long run. When you strong arm your partner is not a partner. You're actually putting your partner on a different level, and that's where it doesn't work in the long run. But this is to say that genuine partnerships are the key and established on equal foot without strings attached. So collaborations, acknowledging and addressing the mutual interests and common objectives for all parties lie at the core of functional and durable partnerships. A multidimensional approach is certainly key, as is the balance between short and long-term objective. Evidence is also necessary to understand from a whole of route approach or whole of route perspective what are the key needs, opportunities, and challenges. Sometimes policy and practice are highly influenced by prejudice and bias without sound evidence. Strengthening migration governance can take many shapes, from information sharing to operational coordination, capacity development, to opening more legal avenues. But all these tools work only on the basis of a genuine spirit of collaboration and common understanding. Migration is a complex and a multidimensional phenomenon, and cooperation to build capacity on one front, such as, for example, border management, should not override efforts to guarantee people's dignity and safety, including livelihoods, opportunities, and more legal and safe migration channels.
Mr. Hart, thank you. Thank you very much, first of all, for the work you are doing, and secondly, for your time, for being so open, frank, highlighting the complexity of migration management and trying to answer to my very difficult and complex questions as well. So thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you very much, and speak to you soon.